Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave, and we'd love to know where you think we got this right and where you think we just don't understand what we're talking about, which you can do on Rumble or on our website, unsilentpodcast.com, or a variety of social media channels where people can challenge us to their heart's content. So, Brian, interesting week this week. Anything pique your attention?
Yeah, I got a couple little things. I'm gonna share a video. I think this is about a minute long. And the reason I chose this video, it's 50 seconds long. The reason I chose this video is I'm sure that Kenny G, the generation and the guy we're talking to in the future, the fictitious character you and I have made up, as I look back on this period of time that we're going through and wonder what the hell we were thinking, I'm sure in whatever their version of the history book is going to be, the AI glasses they wear, or the brain plant that funnels them information a la Matrix style or whatever, is going to talk about the partisanship and the discontent and the finger pointing and all that kind of stuff. But this particular video I thought was particularly illustrative of that. And also, when you see the players, it's going to hit home for you because of who the players are. So, this is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Testifying at the Senate Appropriations Committee and getting into a fairly heated exchange with your Senator Patty Murray.
Oh, great. Okay. She's the senator. Let's be clear on something. She's the senator from Washington. Not my senator.
I know you voted for her. Stop it. Don't act like you didn't. There's no question you and her are like peas and carrots.
Yeah,
right?
we're the barefoot or what?
So I'm gonna share this video, and I think the audio is good enough that people will get the gist of what's going on here. So, here we go. Let me give it a whirl here and make sure you can hear this. Okay, and here we go.
Senator, I want to point out that in 2021, at the beginning of his administration, President Biden submitted his budget on May. You know what? You made an accusation of me, and I'm going to answer it.
Okay, I appreciate.
On May 28th, he submitted his budget. So our budget. We're a new administration.
Okay, you can.
And I also want to point out.
Just 2 minutes left. I asked you a specific.
I want to point out something, Senator. You presided here, I think, for 32 years. You presided over the destruction of the health of the American people.
Well,
our people are now the sickest people in the world.
Seriously,
because you have not done your job.
Seriously, that is an.
What have you done about it? What have you done about the epidemic of chronic disease,
Mr. Secretary?
What have you done about the epidemic of chronic disease, Senator?
Oh, that's
my gosh.
Oh, I like that. Let's play that one again. I enjoyed that.
I particularly love it. Now, in her defense, it's been a while since somebody actually painted a politician into a corner on any side of the aisle, regardless of party, and point blank said, "You've been in charge of this for 32 years. What have you done to make this better?" And quite frankly, I guess now I think about the second thing I'm going to show you is kind of a similar instance. And what I mean is, for so many years now, we've danced around these things. We've spoken in platitudes and slogans and party taglines and stuff like that. But we haven't forced people to ask pointed questions.
Right.
Politicians go on, a supposed, corporate news station, regardless, again, of party affiliation. And they do these pieces where they edit things together and they ask questions. They're asked questions. They don't really answer them. There's not really a pointed follow-up, though. We haven't really painted them into a situation where they must answer the question or look completely foolish.
Right.
And I anticipate we're going to have to see more of that. I don't think there's a resolution to anything we're facing without that.
Right.
But part of me, even if it was the parties were reversed, Republicans have done plenty of dumb things or just not acted or whatever. I got to tell you, I am so excited to see people just there be consequences for their ineptitude or inaction.
You bet. 100%. I mean, 100%. I don't know if you're going to play the one because we don't plan these things for our listening audience. So I don't know what you're going to play next.
Audience, our planning session, it consists
Our-
of, are you ready? Yeah. Are you ready?
Yeah, press the record button, Dave. Okay, I can do that. But one of the things, one of the best quote of the day is when, are you going to play a Marco Rubio one?
I'm not.
Okay,
I'm
well,
going to
then
play. I'm going to. Yeah.
Then let me
Go
insert
ahead.
this in. The best quote of the day was one of the things that typically happens in these Senate and House hearings and all that is one of the people, and they position the Senate and House members up on these podiums, and then if you're testifying, you're in a desk below, and they're on a table below, so you're sort of looking up to this grand inquisitor kind of thing. One of the and Rubio has, if anybody hasn't watched Rubio's performance, it was just stellar. I mean, I was like cheering, go Marco.
Yeah.
And one of the people said, okay, I'm going to ask you a series of yes or no questions. And his response is, this isn't a game show. So it's like, boom. I mean, I'm like, yeah, because you're right. What you said before you played that clip is exactly right. And that is that so much of this and what Patty Byrne was doing there was strictly performative, 100% performative. And what RFK was saying very simply was, you've been in charge. If it's bad, you've been in charge. 32 years. What have you done? And she's all offended, and she's like, well, Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Secretary.
This is wholly out of order. You can't address me this way.
How dare you have the gall to come in here in my house and ask such a question?
And ask me a question about, have I done my job for 3 decades since before the internet was around? Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there needs to be more of this. That to me is public accountability. And when, I mean, we've seen so many of these people testify before these Senate and House committees before, and they're well, Miss Senator, I think but no. Go for it. We need a little bit more. Have you ever watched British Parliament in action? Have you ever seen those guys?
I have, yeah.
I mean,
they're pretty entertaining.
They are. They're like standing up and yelling and shaking their fists at each other and stuff. I'm like, I'm down.
You know what's funny about that, Dave, is in regular society, we're seen as the brash ones.
Oh, yeah.
Between us and UK. But in our politics, we are much more passive and polite, and they're way more raucous. It's really interesting dynamic.
I think they just save up all their anger for Parliament sessions and scream at each other.
Yeah.
So I mean, but anyway, I love that. I hadn't seen that clip with RFK before, but that was golden.
And one of the things that I want to point out is in the spirit of full transparency and acknowledging my own biases. I'm the same guy that, I don't know, 6 or 8 months ago was talking about how you can't trust people if they can't answer a yes or no question. So as you were telling me, Rubio, and I'm saying, yeah, this ain't a game show. It does depend on which tribe is up to bat, right?
I mean, no, we do need to be honest about it. I totally agree. We do need to be honest about it. But I think context matters in those things. I mean, sometimes it's like, well, did you kill that person? Well, there's context here. No, there's no context. Did you kill him or not? I mean, so
but if the question was, did you murder that person? Now context does matter.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. But you can tell. So you can tell.
I think it's important for me personally to acknowledge I have these biases. And so when I get excited or against simple things like answering yes or no questions, yes, there's nuance and context. And there's times where it is objectively more appropriate to not answer yes or no questions. Right. And there's times where it is objectively more appropriate to answer yes or no questions.
Right.
And I would hope I have the intellectual honesty to call balls and strikes on that. Yes. Although I need to recognize that I'm probably not batting 100% on that.
Well, nobody does. I mean, really, if we go into it with the idea that, we're all flawed human beings and we all have biases. And I think it's one of the things that drives people nuts about like these Senate hearings, the other ones, that Senate House hearings, the people go into them and the legislators position themselves as if they have no bias, as if
Right.
they're like, I'm just here to arrive at the truth. And
Yeah.
that's why I'm asking you this loaded
When
question.
they're completely as full of shit as the people they're grilling.
100%.
And
100%.
and their righteousness is just oozing out of their skin, like somebody who ate a pound of garlic or something.
Exactly.
Like that.
And I do think that the public does, I think, recognize that. And I think this is why, this week in particular, we've had a number of these contentious kinds of hearings that have taken place. And I think I think folks have recognized, I think people on Trump's side in particular have recognized that the public has an appetite for a real honest conversation. I mean, it might not be pretty.
I think that the momentum for that is swinging for sure.
Yes.
I think there's still a healthy percentage of people who just want their tribe to win.
Well, sure. No, that's absolutely
But
true.
I do think that people are recognizing the gravity of our situation. Now, when I say gravity of our situation, I mean the country, in my view, and I would say many people share this, what percentage, I don't know, but it's not functional the way it is.
Right. No, I agree.
Economically, it's not functional.
Right.
The global debt that we've amassed is unsustainable. It's going to be an absolute catastrophe when it comes apart, and it's going to come apart. And BSing and lying our way through that I think we all are recognizing like just that one little fact, segment of what's not working.
Right.
You can't lie your way through bankruptcy.
No,
it doesn't work. Right.
No, doesn't work.
We can't solve any problems.
Right.
Everything that's happened in the last 3 months has happened via executive order, which can all be undone with a stroke of a pen, just like it was put in place.
Yep.
And Congress isn't able, by and large, to really do
anything
because they're playing games and they're doing these word dances and the verbal fencing with each other, and they're not really solving problems. I think by and large people are just getting tired of that, and it'll be interesting to see if there comes a point where people prioritize resolution over their tribe winning. That's gonna be an interesting thing to see how that unfolds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It'll be less important for my tribe to win is like we just get some resolution and start making some kind of progress, right? Now the counter argument to that, I think was it yesterday or today that the Senate voted 100-0 on the no tax on tips thing,
right?
Which I thought was kind of funny because can you imagine being the senator that voted no on that?
Oh yeah,
you would just absolutely be crucified in the media.
Yeah, you're done. You're game over.
Yeah. So that was the first one that I got a real chuckle out of that for, again, probably selfish reasons that are not reasonable, but
no, it's completely reasonable.
Nonetheless, I thought it was really, really fascinating. And then this thing happened today, and this I was stunned when I saw this, and I can't wait to see it. And I don't know if you've seen it or not, but I'll share my screen again here. This is about I think a 40-second or so clip. This is Trump in the Oval Office today with the president from South Africa. Did you see this?
I've heard about it. I haven't actually seen the clip.
All right. So let me set this up. Here's Trump in the Oval Office with, whatever kind of delegation from South Africa, including the president of South Africa. And presumably they're here to negotiate some kind of economic tariff deal. I don't know what the premise is for why they're here, but I'm guessing it's something to do with that because that's been all the talk over the last few weeks. I don't know what it is, but then he springs this on him. And so here's the video.
But we're starting with this whiteness. We're cutting the throat of whiteness. Shoot, kill, Gamasa, kill the Pua, the farmer, kill the Pua, the farmer.
Kill the Boer, the farmer.
Shoot to kill, Gamasa.
Okay, so I don't know what this guy's title is, if he's the prime minister or if he's some kind of party. I don't remember what his title is, but he's the guy we played the clip of last week on this podcast, talking about kill the Boer, kill the farmer, paraphrasing loosely. Don't criticize me too much for not, but this is for the sake of time. Kill the white farmer. Essentially what the message is. But as I'm looking at this, Trump doesn't tell them this. He brings out like a 50-inch TV and plays this for them. And what the reason I'm keeping the image up is look at the body language of the people sitting on the couch.
Oh yeah, they're not.
Look at the faces on the people, absolutely in disbelief they're being called on this.
I know,
And
I know.
I absolutely love this.
Yeah.
Now, again, I have biases on this and things like that. And if they had done the same thing to, Castro about Cuba and things like that, I would hope to believe I would be just as excited about somebody actually being called on their stuff. But this is another instance where we're not dancing around this crap anymore.
Right.
He brought them in. You could argue it wasn't very tactful to spring it on him, but I'm kind of glad he did. I got to be honest with you. I'm kind of glad he did, because they wouldn't have shown up if he would have told him, probably, right? Yeah. And they would have had a statement prepared, and they would have had a plausible deniability excuse built up and things like that. And you can see from the looks on their faces, they're caught dead to rights.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was, I heard about that. I thought it's beautiful. I mean, the thing about Trump is you just never know what the dude is going to do. He's just going to, but it is, I mean, and this is, of course, I'm sure all of and I haven't really seen a whole lot of response because I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Well, I'll share one with you here in a second.
Oh, okay, good. I was going to say, I think all the polite people were probably very upset that he did this, but yeah, sure. Tell me what happened.
Well, here, one of the usual suspects, CNN. Here was their immediate response. Here they are. They're like a 30-second clip. So here's what CNN has to say in response.
Cyril Ramaphosa brought his best diplomatic self to this meeting, but nothing could have prepared him for this multimedia ambush that President Trump laid out, with the video, with printed out news stories. This was a laundry list of debunked conspiracy theories.
Debunks conspiracy theories. Okay.
Some are telling me this is AfriForum propaganda. AfriForum is a white Africana lobby group that's considered a white nationalist organization by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Almost everything that President Trump said in the Oval Office is not true, was inaccurate, has been repeatedly debunked.
So been repeatedly debunked by the was it the Southern Poverty Law Center or something like that, which again, calling complete balls and strikes. There's
they're not biased at all.
But you and I literally played the video last week of the guy saying, kill the boars, kill the farmers, or shoot the farmers, shoot the boars, whatever, shoot to kill.
Right.
The boars are a particular subset of the population that has some immutable characteristics. And if you want to investigate what that is, I can give you the short version. They're white people who immigrated from, Denmark or Sweden.
400 some odd years ago. Yeah, 4 centuries ago.
400 years ago. Yeah. So immediately CNN comes on and says, it's a bunch of, don't believe what your eyes tell you with the video. Don't believe what your ears tell you with the recordings you've heard. This has all been debunked by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And therefore it's not to be given any kind of weight or credibility.
Well, and that is the surprising thing about that, is that, I mean, it was in their own words. It's in these folks' own words, caught on video. That video has been played millions of times. How?
And again, I'm paraphrasing. I'm probably getting the language wrong. The videos are easy to find if you want to go on there and see. I'm not supposing that I'm getting it word for word correctly, but I would argue that the intent is being conveyed pretty accurately.
Well, yeah, it's you can't really. I don't see how you can even possibly not understand what that means. I mean, it's just so utterly and completely in your face what they're saying and what they're doing. How can you? Because you're right. They're literally telling you. I mean, it's very Orwellian. Don't believe what your eyes have just and what your ears have just reported to you. That's all a debunked conspiracy theory. How?
Yeah.
How? I mean, how?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And this I think is, again, one of the reasons I chose those two videos after the RFK Patty Murray thing is this is Orwellian. Now, keep in mind, Orwell wrote 1984, and was it 1949? Was that about the year he wrote it?
Late 40s, yeah.
Yeah. So just coming out of the last fourth turning, just coming out of the last crisis era, he identified the behaviors that he then, now he didn't do it in alignment with Neil Howe and Bill Strauss's 80-year cycle, so he did in 1984, but he was writing about the behaviors that he had seen. Don't believe your eyes, don't believe your ears. Big brother is always right. 2 + 2 is 5. because they had gone through the same thing that we're going through now. And that's part of why this 80-year cycle thing, I started going, wait a second, there's something to that. Because when you read 1984 or Animal Farm and all those things, he's writing about the behaviors that we're seeing unfold right here in front of us. And this is a clear illustration of that. Again, the thing happens, they get caught red-handed and confronted with it, and then immediately the state/state media comes in afterwards and says, that's all been debunked. You can't believe that.
Right,
It's
right.
like, I just watched it.
Well, what does it say about society that a bunch of people will then, take that and say, "Oh, well, yeah, I saw that, but that was fake. It's all been debunked."
Yeah.
You know,
I know some of those people, and they're reasonably intelligent people, and they're good-hearted people who have strong characteristics that you would want in a human being.
well,
And
and the strange thing is this reminds me of the response to is Biden mentally equipped for the job? Well, no, there's
Right.
been a bunch of deep fake video. They came up with that word, deep fake.
Yep.
No, cheap fake. Deep fake is a
cheap fake.
legit
Yeah,
word.
yeah.
They made up the word cheap fake to
Yeah.
say, well, no. I've been in these marathon meetings with Biden, and he's like sharper than Einstein in a
Sharper's attack.
he's just he's
This
just
is the
sharp
best.
as a tack.
This is the best Biden we've ever seen.
Right. And now, of course, all of everything comes out. Jake Tapper writes a book. All these different people write a book about that was just not well in it's like the fox in the hen house thing. It's like the fox coming back to the farmer saying, somebody broke into your hen house. Hold on, let me just get the feathers out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Somebody just broke into your hen house and took all your hens, and I think and I'll be happy to help. Give me the name, give me the lock, and I'll program it for you.
Whoever did that, we got to be charged with by the full extent of the law.
Yeah, exactly. It's just
you just remind me of something with Jake Tapper. I didn't say this video, but he was on Megyn Kelly's show, I think yesterday, and she did the same thing. He's written this book about this massive media cover-up. Again, right. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know exactly what all the details are, but the cover-up from within, whether it was the White House or whatever. Right. And she grills him for like a minute in this video clip of, you were there. You had the opportunity to ask follow-up questions, and you did not. You say that these people didn't do it, but you were there. You could have done it on this date. And she gives dates.
Oh, wow.
This date, and 12 days before this thing happened, you were there. And and again, these pointed questions is becoming more of a, it's changing the dynamic of the conversation, because we're not allowing them the wiggle room to skate out of these things anymore. That is a very noticeable thing that's happening very quickly over last few weeks.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting. Well, and I think there's just too much coming out that for people to ignore. I mean, so now we, on the Biden thing, now we hear that he's, and I hope he gets well. He's got a 9th degree, stage 9 or what, the prostate cancer. I mean, very aggressive. Yeah. And everybody's saying that as a result of that diagnosis, that he knew probably when he was running for president the first time that he had prostate cancer, and of course we never saw his PSAs. This is getting a little bit into the weeds, but we didn't see his PSAs. We had which is what I'm sure you get tested. I get tested on my PSAs very regularly because you get over 50 years old, and happy birthday. You're an ancient guy like me now.
I'm now in my 6th decade. That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. But and if anybody out there is not getting their PSAs done at least once a year, maybe more regularly than that, then you're an idiot. You should do it because it could kill you. So there is zero question. There cannot be any question that the most powerful man in the world, with the most resources available to him of anybody on planet Earth, had his PSAs done and knew he had cancer. I mean, it's just not deniable. And it is also undeniable that it was hidden from the American public because that would have undermined the narrative. So but we have all these people out here now just kind of making excuses. Well, and I don't even know what the excuses are, because it's impossible. And I think people are just sort of fed up with that. Even people on the left are fed up with that. And
well, the timing of that was right after the Jake Tapper book comes out, accusing / exposing the quote unquote cover up.
Right.
And then what do you know, 2 days or 3 days later after that book is released or that he starts hitting the media circuit or whatever,
Right.
this diagnosis is released, and it's fairly transparent as to generate some sympathy and things like that.
Right.
And how could you attack the old guy who has stage 9 prostate cancer,
Right.
or whatever that is, right? But I do think people are becoming wise. Like you and I talked about a few months ago, the fallback position for COVID is, well, we didn't know any better. Well, okay, that's true, but let's parse that out from the behavior you had of locking things down when you didn't know any better. Those are two separate conversations. There's what we knew, and then there's how we behaved in an environment where we didn't know things.
Right.
Those are two separate conversations.
Right.
Where 2 years ago, it would be excruciating to try to have that conversation with somebody, where now I think people are just getting more wise as to the game that's been going on. Okay, well, two things can be true at once. We can absolutely have sympathy for a human being who's going through probably a not very fun experience and perhaps the end of their life.
Right.
And separate from that, you also lied to us.
Yeah, you lied to us about something of incredible importance. And
yeah. If you didn't have the mental faculty because of the treatment you were having, which caused some kind of mental fall off or whatever, or you're just not as healthy as you presented to us, who was running the effing country?
Well, see, that was going to be my next question. Is from there, who had the nuclear codes, who was giving the go orders, or who would have given the go orders on any,
who had the auto pen,
life and death. Yeah, I mean, who used the auto pen? I mean, I've seen articles just today about, well, was Jill run? Did we have President Biden, but it wasn't the President Biden we thought we had? I mean, who knows? And we just don't know. And I think that's the big problem. Is it just further undermines the institutions were already dying. They were already, lost, in trust and lost the confidence of the American people.
I think the gravity of the situations, plural, are beginning to become evident enough that people have a tolerance for not allowing wiggle room.
Yeah.
Like we talked a minute ago about, like, there's the economic factor. Okay, there's also the factor that we're in like 3 different theaters on the verge of World War III.
Right.
And we're gonna send how many more tens of thousands of young men to die in a war that, if it goes anything like the last 4, it's going to be a debacle, and we will make rich people richer, and we will kill a bunch of young men and women that could have had a happy life.
Right.
There's parents' rights versus government rights. There's all these little areas where things are the consequences are pretty dire. And I think people are just kind of tired of the dancing around the truth, and I expect there to be more cheering for these kinds of pointed questions and behaviors where people are put in a situation where they have to confront reality rather than doing what they've done for 40 years or 80 years or 60 years or whatever, dancing around these things. You can go back as far as the Warren Commission to see like clear-cut evidence of just like dancing around very important topics and frankly getting away with it.
Well, and it's interesting that this could cause if you look at Senator Murray in that first clip, she appeared to be blindsided by his questions. I mean, just
stunned for sure.
She was, and I think if politicians begin to think, well, if I ask these questions, it might be a Patty Murray moment. There might be some more honesty, at least to a little degree, that hasn't existed for a while, and that would be refreshing. People would relish that. I mean, if she had responded like, yeah, we should have done more. She could have gotten out of that so easily. It's like, yeah, I could have done more. I had some bad advice. I mean, she could have made excuses and got out of it if she really wanted to, right? But she, of course, nobody does it. Nobody ever apologizes. Nobody ever says they made a mistake. When politicians begin to do that, there will be at least some degree of return of trust for these folks. And, that's probably the transition that takes place during the fourth turning, when there's an existential crisis in which we have to trust our politicians to lead us in a positive way, or else we're going to die.
Well, they've had a setup that has allowed them to elude this kind of thing. Like they pass these bills that have 43 different things they're doing, so they have plausible deniability on any one topic. Well, I had to vote yes on that because the vote no would mean we would have had to turn away, $80 billion for cancer research, or whatever, or they've built this or constructed this system by which they always have an out.
Right.
And so I think that when they're confronted in a situation like that where they don't have an out, first of all, they don't have very many reps in dealing with that because they haven't had to. That muscle's atrophied.
Yep.
And they're probably just bewildered it's even happening because that's not how it works in DC.
Yeah, that's how it's never worked that way, and as a result of that, they're unprepared. But yeah, I do think that gives us some hope that there could be some accountability and there could be some, real questions get asked as opposed and maybe even some, the problem with these Senate hearings and House hearings is they're all 100% performative. There's no problem solving that takes place. If you get some of the most powerful, richest, highest credentialed and people in the world together, you would hope that they would use their time in a manner that would be solving some significant problems. So yes, Senator, we've got all of these problems that are happening. Let's talk about together right now. Let's spend the balance of our time. Let's yield it to problem solving, as opposed to it's nothing but finger pointing. It's nothing but finger pointing and investigations and all of that. Imagine if it's like, the senator says, well, I've got these resources that are available, and the secretary says, well, I've got these resources. Why don't we have your people talk to my people, and we're going to do this research, and we're going to, why couldn't that happen with our most powerful?
There's two things that immediately come to mind as to why. The first one is you said they're not solving problems, and this is where the first thought I had was Thomas Sowell reminding us that they are in fact solving problems. They're solving their own problems.
Yes.
Politicians solve politicians' problems,
Sure.
not our problems.
Sure.
So that's the first thing that came to mind. And the second why is going back to what we talked about a month or two ago, which is the purpose of a system is what it does.
Yeah.
What this system does is give them maximum profit and plausible deniability for everything.
Right.
That's
Total
what
power.
the system does.
Yeah.
That is the system. And that system is not going to survive whatever era we're in for the next 5 to 8 years or whatever that time frame is going to be.
Right.
That system cannot survive that
Right.
and will not survive that. But they're not going to just quietly lay down their crown and head off into the sunset. That's not how that goes.
No, that's not how any of these things happen. And that's why the only way to fix the system is essentially to face it blowing up in our faces. That does bring to mind what also happened this week, which is notable, and that was the downgrade in credit of the United States, the credit rating of the United States, which subsequently caused the downgrade of credit rating of our major banks, of our major institutions. And the result of that, typically all that kind of stuff happens in the ether sphere, and it's like, well, how does that affect Brian? How does that affect Dave? But this has a real effect on us, on all of us in the country, because it means that one, we are less financially stable than we were before, and two, that our interest rates potentially, as we borrow money, if we need to borrow money, will go up because of the credit risk that's involved with that. So those kinds of things, and it has a very negative effect potentially if the credit rating if the interest rate of the United States on its debt goes up, then the ability of the United States government to do things becomes significantly decreased because of the amount of money that we've talked about this before. We already spend more money on our interest payments than we do on our Defense Department. So that is completely unsustainable. And that does have very real world effects for individuals and for the potential security posture of the entire country.
Well, and further, I was watching a guy talk about this. I don't understand the bonds and yields, and I have a very infantile understanding of all that stuff. But one of the things I was essentially the debt has been quote unquote safe for many years. Now it's less safe. So people who loan that money, people who buy the bonds, want a higher return. They want more money because it's riskier. Right.
Yeah, sure.
That's the gist of it. But the video I watched, it was fairly educational for me, again, given my elementary understanding of this stuff, which is very elementary. But there's basically four major financial power centers in the world. There's the United States, Japan, Europe, and China.
Yeah.
Those are the four. Of the four, even though we just got downgraded, we're still the strongest.
Yes. Oh yeah.
And so the guy's point was, just like a lion going after a herd of gazelles or whatever, you go after the weakest one. Well, which is the weakest one? Japan is. Japan's debt to GDP is like 260 or 280% or something like that.
Yeah.
They've been artificially suppressing interest rates for like 30 years now.
Oh yeah. Yep.
It's unsustainable, and there's somewhere estimates between $7 and $20 trillion in this yen carry trade, where they borrow yen at artificially suppressed interest rates and invest in like U.S. bonds or U.S. equities or whatever, and they get the difference. It costs them a little bit of money to borrow the yen, and they make a little bit more money in other investments, mostly in the United States. Well, as the bond markets globally get unstable, the people will pull their money from the weakest one, which is Japan.
Right.
But Japan is the foundation for all these little carry trades where you borrow at 0.5% and you make 2% and you get the 1.5% difference.
Right.
Well, when, not if, when that all comes apart, it's going to be a global catastrophe, not a U.S. catastrophe. So many of us are looking at this like, well, Moody's downgraded the U.S. That means we're unsafe in the U.S. And his argument is, no, this is a global crisis. It will cause a global recession / depression / whatever. And that also reminds me of Neil Howe talking about recently, one of the guys who wrote The Fourth Turning, about how the fourth turnings are now global. They're not isolated to the U.S. They're not isolated to the U.S. with our European background. They're happening in other parts of the world on a global scale. Countries like Italy and Japan are saying their own versions. Now, we're a big player in world politics and in economics and things like that. So it makes sense that we would kind of spill over. But in this particular fourth turning, it's going to be global. And the other argument is that when the great financial crisis of 2008 happened, the countries basically bailed out the banks, and the countries absorbed all that risk and debt and things like that.
Sure.
So we kind of kicked it uphill a level.
Right.
Well, now there's nowhere to kick it up to. This is as high as it can go. Sovereign debt is as high as it can go. So if that comes down, we are in a world of hurt.
Well, and that got further exacerbated in COVID because that also happened then. So shutting down the economy. I mean, we had a paltry, $21 trillion and $22 trillion or something, a paltry sum, when COVID started, somewhere in the low 20s, something like that. And, the government went around spraying money with a fire hose on everybody. And I took it just like anybody else. I mean, why wouldn't I? But that we're having to pay for that now, and we're really going to have to pay for that, both 2008 and COVID. We're going to have to pay for both of those financial crises in the future because it's completely unsustainable. And and the other part of this debt thing you're talking about that I think is really critical is that we may be the cleanest dirty shirt in the drawer of dirty shirts financially, but at some point, as countries repatriate their own money, people aren't going to buy our debt. People aren't going to be willing to buy our debt, and we can't go spray money on things when people don't buy our bonds. And this is the thing that I think. Why don't people pay attention to the bond? And I'm no financial, advisor or anything like that. So I have a cursory knowledge of these things, not in depth at all. But when they start looking at the long-term debt, they used to talk about the 10-year treasuries, and now we see some of this focus on the 3-year, the short-term debt. I mean, because we had some big debts that are coming due very, very soon. And
we have to roll, I think, $9 trillion of our debt this year.
Yeah, I mean, $9 trillion bucks. That turns out to be a little some real money. I mean, it turns out to be like you take all the billionaires in the world and they can't pay it off. Well, you're starting to talk some real money here pretty soon. So I think all of these things, and the thing that's interesting to me is all of these things happening simultaneously. The repatriation of money to national currencies. It's not happening in bulk, but it is happening right now. And I mean, and what the president has done with the tariff pieces has further done that too, as people take some of their money out, not all of it, but they take some of their money out of the United States, put it in other places. Yet he's gotten some investment in the United States. So Good on you. Good on you, President Trump, for getting. Now, hopefully, a lot of those commitments are not going to be fulfilled until late in his time in office or after he's gone, which means to me they might never be fulfilled.
It might not. If Kamala Harris wins in 28, then all that would go away probably.
Well, everything will go away if she wins in 28. Not just
okay.
Not just
if Gavin Newsom wins in 28,
Gavin Newsom. Okay,
Pete Buttigieg or whatever. I
Yeah.
suspect the Saudis might change their mind on if they're going to invest $160 billion or whatever.
Yeah, exactly right. But the thing that's fascinating about this is, again, and it's again a fourth turning thing, is you've got all of these sort of threads being pulled on at once. You know, the sweater, you can keep wearing the sweater if one thread gets pulled on, but when 5 of them and 10 of them get pulled on at once, when the reserve currency status is not eliminated but is undermined by repatriation of money, either in a forced way or in just a natural way, as people think, the United States is not that great of an investment anymore. We're going to invest in some of our own local companies and our own, local securities. All of these things happening at once is, again, I think what hastens the end of the entire system. Gosh.
Well, and historically, there's only a few ways to fix this. One of them, like FDR, was like, federal stimulus. Like we borrowed a bunch of money and did a bunch of infrastructure and wartime activities, building bombs and trucks and airplanes and stuff like that. And, there's all the Uncle Sam posters from 1943 are, famous. I want you and buy U.S. bonds and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Well, that option's not really on the table this time. We're already overextended. Like, citizens will not have the financial wherewithal to buy those bonds.
Right.
And it's becoming apparent that big institutions and banks and, hedge funds and pension funds and things like that aren't really interested in doing that.
Yeah.
So that option's kind of off the table. The other one is you can inflate the money,
right,
and you can devalue the currency so that it becomes more palpable to pay the debt and make the $37 trillion way less painful, which means all of the buying power goes down.
Yep.
And the other way is war.
Yeah.
And these are as old as time. Like these, going back to Roman times and before that.
Absolutely.
I saw one thing that was talking about the Assyrians inflating their currency. Like, well, how would the Assyrians do that? Like, well, you just hand out more gold coins. Each one's worth less. Like the math is always the same, And so all these things, while they're separate sections of the problem, they are all intertwined ultimately in that the resolutions, there's only a handful of options to pick from. And we have less than we had 80 years ago during World War II.
Well, and there's one other option that you didn't mention to that. So there's a fourth one, and that fourth one we saw exercised. I believe it was in Crete. Or was it Cyprus? It was seaward down by Greece, where the bank depositors took a haircut. So if the government gets in such a bad spot where it can't do it, one of the things, it's a euphemistic term to say that, okay, Brian, you've got $1 million in the bank. You have 900,000 now. You're taking a 10% haircut. So
right. Or like in Roman times, what they did is they conquered a territory and just like took resources from them. So taking resources from somebody would be the fourth option, whether it's internal or external.
Right.
Like just basically taking resources from people, which you could argue is what tariffs are.
Yeah, well, and you could argue that that's, as the United States at some point, if we get into that spot and we do have, we are the most liquid, essentially, society in terms of, the amount of wealth, it wouldn't be a stretch at all to say, okay, every depositor is going to take a 5% haircut, and how does that get sold? That gets sold in one very easy way. 60% of the population, you got no deposits anywhere. You're good. No problem.
Yeah, you're good.
It's all these evil rich people.
We're only going to do the rich.
We're just going to soak the rich. Eat the rich. That's what it's going to be. Eat the rich.
And never mind that, all those smart rich people have their money in Swiss and Cayman Island bank accounts.
Right, exactly. So, I think all of those things, but no matter which one or what combination of those things gets done, it'll be because there's no other option. Because there's, some of the discussion right now, I'm having a debate with a friend of mine in England who loves to chide me on United States policy. And, we're talking about, Trump's going to blow up the debt with tax cuts. Okay, well, I'm always, I haven't met very many tax cuts I don't like. I like tax cuts.
Right.
I like, if you work, you should get to keep more of your money. You can spend it better than the government can spend it. So I disagree with this fundamental concept that, tax cuts inflate the debt. If the debt gets inflated because you spend too much money, not because you don't let people keep what they earn. But on the flip side of that, I do recognize that there is no question that taxes are going to go up. They're going to have to go up. We have there's no possibility. I don't want taxes to go up. I don't want to pay any more taxes. Washington State, not to get too local, and Kenny G probably doesn't give a rip about Washington State in the future if there is such
it'll be part of Canada by his time. Probably.
Yeah, it'll probably have been taken over by the hockey team from Victoria or something. And
California, Oregon, and Washington are all going to be part of Canada, and we're going to get Calgary or whatever, Alberta or whatever.
Be another problem. My dad's Canadian. I could deal with it a little bit more maple syrup. But anyway, the point is though that if that ends up happening, then how are I lost my train of thought. See, you distracted me. I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
Carry on. I'm gonna have a drink.
Well, one of the things that is going to have to be reconciled through no matter what. I agree taxes are going to go up. How it's going to happen and when and to what degree, I don't know.
Right.
But we're going to have to face our spending problem.
Yeah.
I just don't see any way. I don't think they can inflate the currency enough to continue spending at the pace they're spending.
Right.
And I think that reality coupled with the new trend, even though it's a micro trend, it's not a big trend yet, it's a micro trend of people who have made decisions being put in situations where they have to answer pointed questions and actually have to face the consequences for their actions so far. I think all those things go hand in hand. Yeah. And I think that it's going to be excruciating to go through. But I certainly like that better than the alternative of a exchange of tactical nukes somewhere in the middle of Ukraine or Taiwan or wherever else.
Yeah. Well, I do think that if when we reach that point, the flashpoint is going to be when our social safety net gets severely cut. And so taxes are going to go up. There's no question about that. And the social safety net in the United States will become significantly less generous.
I think that is just as, if not more likely than everybody's going to take a 5% haircut on their deposits.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be, everyone's going to take a 25% haircut on their Social Security and their Medicare and Medicaid and things like that. Or, starting on this, if you were born on or after this date, your benefits are going to be 50% of whatever, right. I think things like that are just as likely, if not more likely than actually taking cash out of people's deposit accounts.
Yeah. I think you're right.
I know.
I suspect that that could be. We've talked about what trigger event is it going to be that sends us into the crisis, into the final stages of the crisis that we then have to consolidate our efforts around in order to survive. And I think it's just as likely that could be the thing that puts us over the edge. All of these financial things together that put us in a spot where, you think the George Floyd riots were bad. What happens when we no longer have, when unemployment benefits or welfare benefits or, all of that get cut by 50%, the streets will be filled.
I would put as a front runner, say top 3 to 5 triggering events when we can know let's say people stop buying bonds,
right?
Government bonds, and we can no longer spend more than we take in. That to me is a front runner for the triggering event.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think, the financial piece, I think the interesting thing is there's a limited number of places, I think, as far as I can tell, maybe it's a lack of imagination on my part. There's a limited number of places where we can get into all-out war. So there's China, there's Russia in Europe,
Middle East.
Middle East. There's a limited number of places in the world where you can get on. There are so many ways that the whole financial system could go down the toilet.
Yeah,
because we've made this.
Yeah.
Here's the thing for Kenny G, I think, for the future that's important. If maybe Kenny G will be the president of the North American Union or something like that, project out. for Kenny G, if you construct an edifice that is so incredibly complex that nobody really understands it, I mean, nobody understands the total complexity of the financial system that we live in now. It's not possible. I mean, only maybe AI could understand it, but human beings
maybe
can't understand it. It's just if you get to that point where you have that type of system, it's inevitable that it's going to fall apart because nobody can pay attention to all of the levers at any one time.
And nobody's incentivized to. All what people are incentivized to is figuring out their little piece of the financial piece and how to extract the most amount of wealth for them in this one little angle, in this one little piece. And there is nobody to make sure it's all working like a well-oiled machine, and nobody's incentivized to. They're incentivized to get their little piece of whatever little angle they figured out.
And they're incentivized. And see, this also plays back into the fourth turning theory. They're incentivized for a very limited period of time, because I care mostly, I mean, if we're all honest about it, I care mostly about what happens in my lifetime. I mean, I like to think that I'm egalitarian enough and forward thinking enough. I care about my kids. I care about my grandkids.
Listen, we're selfish creatures. How's this gonna impact me? That exactly. Like it or not, that's how we're wired.
120, and if I'm 120 and there's a war, I'm not going to give a rip. I'm going to be like, just feed me and lay me back in my recliner.
If you're 120 and the war's 18,000 miles away, you're going to care even less.
Yeah, you're going to care less. So therefore, that's why I think that goes to the incentive structure that we have for all of these systems. So, how do we let ourselves get into this scenario, either from a foreign policy perspective or from a financial perspective? It's because the incentive structure for individuals in power is very much short term, is very much election to election or lifetime to lifetime. The time frame of a long human life that Strauss and Howe talk about of 80 years. It's like, yeah, sure, we're going to have to deal with Social Security, but Mitch McConnell, I'm going to be dead. I don't care. I mean, not to cast aspersions on him. That's anybody, any old person is going to be in that scenario, and so it's inevitable that we end up in a spot where we're in.
It does seem that way for sure. Well, these events are happening at a fast and furious pace. It doesn't seem like we're going to run out of things to talk about anytime soon.
I don't think so. Yeah. I just, well, you know what, Brian, I hope that we do, because, I would love for us to be mistaken about all this stuff. We're not. I mean, we're not.
Yeah,
but
I'm sure we're mistaken about details. I don't think we're mistaken about the overarching concepts.
Right. No, the direction.
I'm sure we're getting details wrong regularly.
Yeah.
I don't think we're getting the behaviors and the cycles incorrect. How we paint the details is probably wrong in many ways.
They used to call them megatrends. You remember that book in I think it was the 80s or 90s, Megatrends? These big. I mean,
I didn't read much in the 80s. I was pretty young back then.
Yeah, I know. You're a young kid. You only recently graduated into the second half of the century club.
That's right.
Well, welcome. Yeah. So I do think all these things are big trends, and they will play out as we've discussed. And
for sure. Yeah, the big trends are going to play out, and human behaviors with all of our flaws are going to play out. And I think those some of the rules that we can agree on are not going to change anytime soon.
Yep.
All right. As Dave mentioned at the beginning, we'd love to hear where you think we got it right or where we got it wrong. You can do that at unsilentpodcast.com, or Rumble has a great comment section. And until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next week.
Do you want to be unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.